The wine glass made that delicate crystal sound as Victoria set it down, her laugh echoing across the restaurant like broken promises. I watched from my corner table as my ex-wife threw her head back, designer earrings catching the candlelight, while her new husband, Preston, leaned in close enough to whisper something that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. Poor man. Still a secretary? Preston's voice carried just loud enough for me to hear. He gestured in my direction with his Rolex-adorned wrist, not bothering to lower his voice. Look at that off-the-rack suit. Some people never learn to aim higher. Victoria's eyes found mine across the dimly lit restaurant. For a moment, I saw something flicker there. Maybe guilt, maybe pity. Then she smiled that cold smile I remembered so well and raised her glass in a mock toast. To moving up in the world, she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I lifted my own glass of house wine, not the $100 bottle they were sharing, and nodded politely. Inside, I was calculating numbers. Big numbers. Numbers that would make Preston's flashy entrepreneur lifestyle look like pocket change. Still driving that old Honda, I bet, Preston continued, cutting into his $60 steak. What is it now? 15 years old? Victoria told me you never had much ambition. Good thing she found someone who knows how to make real money. The waiter approached their table with practiced deference, the kind reserved for customers who tip well and tip often. Preston ordered another bottle of wine, without looking at the price. Victoria smoothed her silk dress, Armani if I remembered her tastes correctly, and laughed at something Preston whispered. I took another sip of my wine and smiled. If only they knew. The truth was, I hadn't been a secretary in 15 years. That assistant job at Victoria's law firm was how we met, sure. I was 25, fresh out of college, filing papers and answering phones, while she was the rising star attorney with corner office ambitions. She was beautiful, brilliant, and completely out of my league, or so everyone thought. We dated for 2 years, married for 3 more. She left when I was still just a secretary with no drive to better himself, her exact words from the divorce papers. Said she needed someone who matched her ambition, someone who could give her the lifestyle she deserved. That was 12 years ago. Preston was gesturing wildly now, probably telling Victoria about his latest business venture. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he ran some kind of tech startup, always chasing the next big deal. The kind of guy who leased luxury cars and rented expensive suits to maintain an image his actual bank account couldn't support. Excuse me, sir? The waiter had approached my table. The gentleman over there asked me to give you this. He handed me a business card. Preston Montgomery, CEO, Montgomery Digital Solutions. On the back, someone had scrawled, still hiring, if you're looking for a real career. I pocketed the card and left a 20 on the table. As I walked past their table toward the exit, Victoria caught my arm. David, she said, her voice softer now. How have you been? Can't complain, I replied. Congratulations on the marriage, by the way. Preston seems ambitious. She glanced at her husband, who was already back to his phone, probably checking stock prices or social media. He's closing a big deal tomorrow. $100 million acquisition. Finally moving into the big leagues. That's impressive, I said, meaning it. $100 million was serious money, even by my standards. Preston looked up from his phone. Maybe when this goes through, I'll throw some work your way. Always need good secretaries. I smiled and shook his hand. I appreciate that. Good luck with your deal. As I walked to my car, yes, still the Honda, though I could afford to buy Preston's leased BMW 10 times over, I pulled out my phone and made a call. Jennifer, it's David. I need you to pull the file on Montgomery Digital Solutions. Yes, the $100 million deal. Schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning. And Jennifer, make sure the conference room is ready. We might have some familiar faces joining us. I hung up and sat in my car for a moment, watching through the restaurant window as Victoria and Preston continued their celebration. Tomorrow, they'd learn what ambition really looked like. Tomorrow, they'd discover that the secretary they'd just mocked was the CEO of the private equity firm they needed to sign off on their deal. Tomorrow, the masks would come off. The alarm went off at 5 a.m., same as it had every morning for the past 12 years. I'd built my empire on routine, discipline, and the kind of grinding work ethic that Victoria had found so boring when we were married. My apartment was modest by design, 1 bedroom in a decent neighborhood furnished with IKEA and Target finds. The neighbors thought I was a middle manager somewhere, maybe insurance or accounting. I drove the Honda, wore suits from Men's Warehouse, and kept my head down, the perfect disguise for a man worth $2.4 billion. The shower water was lukewarm, the way it always was in this building. I could afford to buy the entire complex, but anonymity was worth more than luxury. As I shaved, I thought about the look on Preston's face when he'd handed me that business card. The casual cruelty of successful people toward those they perceived as beneath them. I'd seen that look before. In Victoria's eyes, the day she served me divorce papers. "You're a good man, David," she'd said, standing in our kitchen, the kitchen I'd painted myself because we couldn't afford contractors. "But good isn't enough anymore. I need someone who wants more from life." What she didn't know was that I'd already started wanting more. The day after she left, I took my savings, $37,000, and started a small investment fund. I worked 18-hour days, researched companies until my eyes bled, and made the kind of calculated risks that either make you rich or destroy you completely. The first year I made $200,000. The second year, $800,000. By year 5, I was managing $50 million in assets. By year 10, it was $500 million. Now, Blackstone Capital Management, my firm, controlled assets worth more than most small countries' GDP. We were the shadow behind dozens of major acquisitions, the silent partner in deals that made headlines. And I was still driving a Honda and shopping at Target. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Martinez, my assistant, and the only person who knew my full story. "Montgomery meeting confirmed for 10 a.m. conference room prepped. Legal team standing by. This is going to be interesting." Jennifer had been with me for 8 years, hired when the firm was still small enough to fit in a shared office space. She was brilliant, loyal, and had a talent for reading people that bordered on supernatural. When I told her about last night's restaurant encounter, she'd laughed so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. "Your ex-wife's husband needs your signature for his big deal," she'd said. "David, this is better than Christmas." I grabbed my usual breakfast, black coffee and a banana, and headed for the Honda. The parking garage under my building was full of sensible cars driven by sensible people living sensible lives. None of them knew that the guy in 4B who sometimes borrowed their jumper cables controlled enough wealth to buy their entire neighborhood. The drive to downtown took 40 minutes in traffic. I used the time to review Montgomery Digital Solutions' file on my phone. Preston's company was impressive on paper. Growing revenue, expanding market share, solid management team. But the numbers told a different story. They were hemorrhaging cash. The growth was funded by debt. The market expansion was costing more than it generated, and the management team had been jumping ship for months. Preston needed this acquisition not to get rich, but to avoid bankruptcy. The $100 million deal wasn't his ticket to the big leagues. It was his life raft. Blackstone's offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower that scraped the belly of downtown clouds. I parked in my reserved spot, the only luxury I allowed myself, and took the elevator to the 32nd floor. "Morning, mister." "Chen," said Marcus, the security guard. I'd kept my ex-wife's last name after the divorce, partly for business reasons and partly because David Chen sounded more anonymous than my birth name. "Morning, Marcus. How's your daughter doing at college?" "Dean's List again. Thanks for asking, sir." These small interactions mattered. Marcus didn't know I'd quietly paid his daughter's tuition through a scholarship fund I'd established. He just knew I was one of the few executives who remembered his name and asked about his family. Jennifer was waiting in my office with coffee, the good stuff, not the swill I drank at home, and a stack of files. "Montgomery's people called 3 times already," she said. "They're nervous. Apparently this deal has to close by Friday or their board pulls the plug." "And today's Wednesday," I mused. "How's their financial position?" "Desperate. They've got maybe 6 weeks of operating cash left. This acquisition is literally do or die." I settled into my chair and looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there, Preston was probably in his office, pacing and checking his phone, waiting for the call that would save his company. Somewhere down there, Victoria was getting ready for work, maybe choosing jewelry that matched her husband's success. In 2 hours, they'd walk into this building expecting to meet with some anonymous CEO who would rubber stamp their deal and make them rich. Instead, they'd find the secretary they'd mocked last night, sitting at the head of the table with the power to destroy their lives. I picked up the phone and dialed. "Jennifer, move the meeting to the main conference room, the one with the view, and make sure we have the full presentation set up ready. I want this to be memorable." "How memorable are we talking?" I thought about Victoria's laugh, Preston's casual cruelty, the business card with its condescending offer of employment. Unforgettable, I said. The main conference room was a temple to corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while the polished mahogany table could seat 20 people comfortably. At the head of the table sat a leather chair that had cost more than most people's cars, though I'd never tell them that. I arrived 15 minutes early and took my position. Jennifer had arranged the files perfectly: Montgomery Digital Solutions financial records, market analysis, and our internal assessments spread across the table like evidence in a trial. Which, in a way, this was. They're in the lobby, Jennifer announced through the intercom. Should I bring them up? Give me 5 more minutes. I said, let them wait. Those 5 minutes felt like hours. I thought about the path that had brought me here, the nights I'd worked until dawn, building something Victoria had never bothered to understand. She'd wanted ambition, but only the kind she could recognize: corner offices, expense accounts, company cars. She'd never understood that real power was quiet, invisible, and patient. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Looking forward to our meeting. This is going to change everything. Preston. The exclamation points told me everything I needed to know about his desperation. Send them up, I told Jennifer. I could hear them in the hallway, Preston's voice booming with false confidence, Victoria's heels clicking against the marble floor. They were talking about lunch plans, about the celebration dinner they'd have tonight after signing the deal. The conference room door opened, and Jennifer ushered them in. Mr. Montgomery, Mrs. Montgomery, please come in. Mr. Chen will be with you in just a moment. I stood slowly, my back to the door, looking out at the city. In the window's reflection, I could see their faces. Preston was adjusting his tie, checking his hair. Victoria was smoothing her skirt, the same nervous habit she'd had when we were married. Then I turned around. Preston's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, a sick understanding. Victoria's champagne glass confidence from last night shattered like crystal hitting concrete. Good morning, I said, walking to my chair. Please, have a seat. Preston remained standing, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Victoria sank into her chair as if her legs had given out. There must be some mistake, Preston finally managed. We're here to meet with the CEO of Blackstone Capital. You are, I said, settling into my chair. I'm David Chen, CEO and founder of Blackstone Capital Management. Thank you for coming. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Preston's hands were trembling slightly as he finally sat down. I believe you have a presentation for me, I continued, opening the first file. $100 million acquisition that's going to change everything. Preston fumbled with his briefcase, pulling out a tablet and a stack of papers. His fingers were shaking so badly, he nearly dropped everything. Yes, He cleared his throat and tried again. Montgomery Digital Solutions has identified a unique opportunity in the emerging markets space. Our target company, Data Flow Systems, represents a perfect synergy with our existing capabilities. I leaned back in my chair, the same polite smile I'd worn at the restaurant on my face. Please, continue. For the next 20 minutes, Preston stumbled through his presentation. The numbers he'd been so confident about yesterday sounded weak in the harsh light of the conference room. His projections were optimistic at best, delusional at worst. Victoria sat silent beside him, her eyes fixed on the table. When he finished, I opened my own files. Interesting presentation, Mr. Montgomery. However, our due diligence has revealed some concerning discrepancies. I slid a financial analysis across the table. Your revenue growth is impressive, but it's entirely debt-financed. Your operating costs have increased 40% in the past year. Your management team has a 60% turnover rate. Preston's face was turning red. Those are temporary adjustments, growing pains. Once we complete this acquisition, you'll be even deeper in debt, I interrupted. Data Flow Systems is hemorrhaging money faster than you are. This isn't an acquisition, Mr. Montgomery. It's a mutual self-destruction pact. Victoria finally spoke. David, surely we can work something out. We have history. You know I wouldn't be involved in anything that wasn't solid. I looked at her for a long moment. She was still beautiful, still brilliant, still the woman I'd loved enough to marry. But she was also the woman who'd walked away because I wasn't ambitious enough. I remember everything, Victoria, I said quietly. That's why I'm here. You're not. Preston leaned forward desperately. Look, I know last night got a little awkward. Maybe I came on too strong, but this deal is solid. You need a miracle, I said, standing up. Your company has 6 weeks of operating capital left. Your board is ready to fire you. Your investors are running for the exits. This acquisition isn't going to save you, Mr. Montgomery. It's going to accelerate your collapse. I walked to the window, my hands behind my back. Blackstone Capital Management passes on this opportunity. I'd suggest you find other financing, but frankly, I don't think you will. The silence behind me was deafening. When I turned around, Victoria was staring at me with something between admiration and horror. You built all this, she whispered. After I left, you built all this. I built what I always wanted to build, I replied. You just weren't interested in waiting to see what it looked like. Preston was gathering his papers with shaking hands. This isn't over. There are other firms, other investors. Are there? I asked. Because word travels fast in our industry, Mr. Montgomery. When Blackstone passes on a deal, people notice. They ask questions. They do their own due diligence. I walked back to my chair and sat down. I give you 48 hours before every major firm in the city knows exactly why we passed. Good luck with your other meetings. Victoria stood up slowly, her composure finally cracking. David, I never meant... Yes, you did, I said. You meant every word. You wanted someone with ambition. Someone who could give you the lifestyle you deserved. Someone who wasn't just a secretary. I gestured around the conference room, at the view, at the empire I'd built from nothing. Congratulations, Victoria. You got exactly what you asked for. They left without another word. Through the window, I watched them emerge from the building 32 floors below. Even from this distance, I could see Preston gesturing angrily while Victoria walked beside him with her head down. Jennifer knocked and entered. How did it go? Exactly as expected, I said. Make some calls. Let our friends at Goldman know that Blackstone passed on Montgomery Digital. Don't elaborate. Just mention that the due diligence raised some red flags. That should eliminate any chance of other financing, Jennifer observed. That's the idea. She paused at the door. You know, I've worked for you for 8 years. I've never seen you enjoy destroying someone before. I turned back to the window, watching the city pulse with life and ambition and dreams that would mostly go unfulfilled. I'm not enjoying it, Jennifer. I'm just finishing it. The news broke on Friday morning. Montgomery Digital Solutions had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection after failing to secure emergency financing. The company's stock, which had been trading at $42 a share on Tuesday, closed at 87 cents. I read the article over my usual breakfast, black coffee and a banana, in my modest apartment kitchen. The business reporter had done her homework. The piece detailed Preston's failed acquisition attempt, the company's mounting debts, and the sudden exodus of key employees who'd seen the writing on the wall. Montgomery Digital Solutions CEO Preston Montgomery could not be reached for comment, the article concluded. The company's collapse represents one of the most dramatic falls in the tech sector this year. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from other investors, reporters, and industry analysts. Everyone wanted to know what Blackstone had seen that others had missed. I let them all go to voicemail. Jennifer called at 8:30. The vultures are circling, she said. 3 different reporters want interviews about the Montgomery deal. No interviews, I said, and draft a statement for the press. Something about Blackstone's commitment to thorough due diligence and responsible investing. Keep it corporate and boring. What about Preston's other business partners? Derek Williams called 6 times yesterday. Derek Williams was Preston's co-founder, a nervous man who'd always struck me as more follower than leader, smart enough to see disaster coming, not brave enough to prevent it. He wants to meet? I asked. Desperately. Says he has information that might interest you. I considered this. Derek had been Preston's right-hand man for 5 years. He'd know where the bodies were buried. Set it up somewhere neutral. That coffee shop on 5th Street. The coffee shop was the kind of place where startup founders pitched ideas on napkins and venture capitalists pretended to be regular people. I arrived first, choosing a corner table with a view of the entrance. Derek walked in 10 minutes later, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. He was thinner than I remembered, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. His hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. David, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. Thank you for meeting with me. What can I do for you, Derek? He ordered a triple espresso, which told me everything about his stress level. I want to talk to you about Preston, about what really happened at Montgomery Digital. Your company failed to secure financing and went bankrupt, I said. What's to discuss? Derek leaned forward, lowering his voice. It wasn't just about the financing. Preston was cooking the books, has been for 2 years. The revenue numbers we showed you? Inflated by 30%, the customer base? Half of those contracts were fake. This was interesting, but not surprising. Desperate entrepreneurs often resorted to creative accounting when reality didn't match their projections. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I kept records. Emails, financial documents, recorded conversations. Everything that proves I tried to stop him. Derek's hands were shaking as he reached for his coffee. I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? I give you everything I have on Preston's fraud. You help me start over. Clean slate, new company, legitimate backing. I studied Derek's face. He was scared, desperate, and probably telling the truth. But he was also the man who'd stood by while Preston built his house of cards. Why should I trust you? I asked. Because I was the one who told Victoria about the bankruptcy filing before it went public, Derek said quietly. I thought she deserved to know what she was getting into. This caught my attention. You talked to Victoria? Yesterday morning. She called me, panicking about Preston's mood, about their finances. I told her everything. Derek met my eyes. She's leaving him, David. Filed for separation this morning. The coffee shop suddenly felt very quiet. Around us, other conversations continued. Startup pitches, business deals, the ordinary ambitions of ordinary people. But at our table, the world had shifted. Where is she now? I asked. Staying with her sister downtown. Preston doesn't know yet. He's been locked in his office since Wednesday, trying to find emergency funding that doesn't exist. I finished my coffee and stood up. Send your evidence to my office. Jennifer will review it. If it's legitimate, we'll consider your proposal. Derek grabbed my arm. David, I know what Preston did to you at that restaurant, the way he talked to you, the way they both treated you. I was embarrassed to be associated with him. But you were associated with him, I pointed out, for 5 years. I was young and stupid and thought loyalty mattered more than ethics, Derek said. I learned better. I looked down at this broken man, this cautionary tale of what happened when you chose the wrong partner, the wrong path, the wrong values. Send me the evidence, I repeated on, we'll see. I left Derek at the coffee shop and walked back to my Honda. The day was crisp and clear, the kind of autumn morning that made even downtown feel alive with possibility. My phone rang as I was driving home. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. I'd never deleted her contact information, though I couldn't say why. I let it ring. She called again 5 minutes later, then again. Finally, she left a voicemail. David, it's me. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to see you. There are things I need to say. Things I should have said a long time ago. I'm at Cafe Luna on Morrison Street. Please. Cafe Luna was where we'd had our first date, 15 years ago. She'd ordered a cappuccino and told me about her dreams of becoming a partner at a major law firm. I'd listened and fallen in love with her ambition, her drive, her absolute certainty about what she wanted from life. I drove past the cafe without stopping. Through the window, I could see her sitting at a corner table, checking her phone, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Some conversations were 15 years too late. Victoria called 17 times over the next 3 days. She left voicemails that started apologetic and grew increasingly desperate. She sent texts that began with, I'm sorry, and evolved into, please, just 5 minutes. She even showed up at my apartment building, though security turned her away. I deleted every message without listening to it. Derek's evidence package arrived on Monday morning, 2 boxes of documents, a hard drive full of financial records, and a USB stick containing audio recordings. Jennifer spent the day reviewing everything with our legal team. It's solid, she reported that evening. Preston wasn't just inflating revenue. He was creating fake companies, manufacturing false contracts, and using shell accounts to hide debt. This is serious fraud. Enough to interest prosecutors? Enough to put him away for 10 to 15 years. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights flicker to life outside my office window. Preston was probably at home right now, maybe having dinner with Victoria, except Victoria wasn't there anymore. Maybe he was alone, finally understanding that his empire of lies was collapsing around him. What do you want to do with this? Jennifer asked. Nothing, I said. She looked surprised. Nothing? David, this guy humiliated you in public. He destroyed his own company with fraud. He hurt a lot of people. Prison would be too easy, I said. Preston's greatest fear isn't jail time. It's irrelevance, being forgotten, becoming the cautionary tale that ambitious young entrepreneurs whisper about. I stood up and walked to the window. Bankruptcy and public failure will destroy him more completely than any prison sentence. He'll spend the rest of his life explaining what went wrong, making excuses, trying to convince people he was just unlucky. And Victoria? That was the question I'd been avoiding. Victoria, who'd called me 17 times. Victoria, who'd left Preston when his money disappeared. Victoria, who was probably realizing that the secretary she'd divorced had become everything she'd claimed to want. Victoria made her choice a long time ago, I said. She chose ambition over loyalty, success over love, image over substance. She got exactly what she asked for. Jennifer gathered the documents. Derek's still waiting for an answer about the new company. Tell him yes. But he starts at the bottom. No special treatment, no shortcuts. If he wants redemption, he'll have to earn it. She paused at the door. You know, there's something poetic about this whole situation. The secretary becomes the CEO. The ambitious wife loses everything. The arrogant entrepreneur falls from grace. It's not poetry, I said. It's just mathematics. Actions have consequences. Choices have costs. Eventually, everyone pays their debts. That night, I drove past Cafe Luna again. Victoria was there. Same corner table, same hopeful expression every time the door opened. She'd been going there every evening for a week, waiting for a conversation that would never happen. I parked across the street and watched her through the window. She was still beautiful, still elegant, still the woman who'd once shared my dreams and my bed and my naive belief that love could conquer practical concerns. But she was also the woman who'd walked away when I needed her most, the woman who'd chosen Preston's flashy lifestyle over our quiet life together, the woman who'd laughed at the restaurant while her husband mocked the man she'd once promised to love forever. My phone buzzed with another text. I know you're angry, I know I hurt you, but please, David, I need to explain. I typed back. There's nothing to explain. You got what you wanted, I got what I deserved, we're even. Her response came immediately. No, we're not. I was wrong about everything. About you, about what mattered, about what I really wanted. You wanted ambition, I replied. You wanted success. You wanted someone who could give you the lifestyle you deserved. Congratulations, you found him. I wanted you, she wrote. I was just too stupid and scared to realize it. I stared at the message for a long time. Through the cafe window, I could see Victoria looking at her phone, waiting for my response. Her face was illuminated by the screen's glow, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the young attorney I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But that woman was gone, had been gone for 12 years. In her place was someone who'd chosen money over love, status over loyalty, appearances over truth. Someone who'd only come back when the money disappeared and the status crumbled and the appearances proved hollow. I turned off my phone and drove home. The next morning, Jennifer handed me a newspaper with a small item buried on the business page. Local tech executive under investigation for fraud. Preston's name was mentioned once, in connection with irregularities in financial reporting at his bankrupt company. Someone leaked Derek's information, Jennifer observed. Someone always does, I said. How's Derek's new company coming along? Slowly. He's learning that building something legitimate takes longer than building something fake. Good lesson. My phone rang. Victoria again. I let it go to voicemail, then deleted the message without listening to it. At lunch, I drove past the building where Victoria's law firm was located. Her BMW was in the parking lot, which meant she was trying to rebuild her career while her world fell apart. I wondered if her colleagues knew about Preston's bankruptcy, about the separation, about her desperate attempts to reconnect with her ex-husband. Probably. Lawyers were worse gossips than high school students. That evening, I broke my routine. Instead of going home to my modest apartment, I drove to the most expensive restaurant in the city, the same restaurant where Victoria and Preston had celebrated their impending success a month ago. I requested the same table where they'd sat, ordered the same expensive wine they'd shared, raised a glass to the empty chair across from me. To ambition, I said quietly. and to getting exactly what you ask for. The waiter approached with the check. Will there be anything else, sir? I looked around the restaurant. Couples celebrating anniversaries, business deals being negotiated over dessert, the ordinary dreams of ordinary people playing out under crystal chandeliers. Just the check, I said. I think I'm finished here. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed one last time. Victoria's name on the screen, another desperate attempt to bridge the gap between what was and what might have been. This time, I answered. Hello, Victoria. David. Her voice was soft, broken. Nothing like the confident attorney I'd once known. Thank you for picking up. What do you want? I want to apologize. For everything, for leaving, for Preston, for the restaurant, for not seeing what you were building. I was wrong about everything. I leaned against my Honda, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's glow. You weren't wrong, Victoria. You were honest. You wanted someone ambitious, someone successful, someone who could give you the life you thought you deserved. You found him. He wasn't you? No, I agreed. He wasn't. Can we try again? Can we start over? The question hung in the air between us, carrying 12 years of regret and possibility and pain. I thought about the young man who'd loved her enough to let her go. I thought about the empire I'd built in her absence. I thought about the restaurant, the laughter, the casual cruelty of people who'd forgotten where they came from. Victoria, I said finally, do you remember what you told me when you left? I said a lot of things I regret. You said good wasn't enough anymore, that you needed someone who wanted more from life. I got into my car and started the engine. The problem wasn't that I didn't want more. The problem was that I wanted different things than you did. What did you want? I wanted to build something that mattered. I wanted to be proud of what I'd accomplished. I wanted to know that the people I loved me for who I was, not what I could buy them. Silence on the line. And Victoria? I wanted someone who would stay when things got difficult. Someone who would believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. Someone who would wait to see what I could become. David, you got exactly what you asked for. I said, and so did I. I hung up and drove home through empty streets, past the cafe where she was probably still waiting, past the dreams we'd shared, and the life we'd never have again. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Some choices once made can never be undone. Some debts once paid close the account forever.